These are the specifications for the data consent protocol. This you can find in DATALOG services, data governance GitHub, and you can find the description about how the data consent works. It consists of 3 different specifications: the data sharing consent, data sharing request, and data sharing agreement. The first document, data sharing consent, is based on the idea that the user can mandate the data altruism or data intermediaries to allow them to collect data and share data with third parties. And the data sharing request is about a document that is created by the data user and requests specific data and data sets within the context of a data intermediary or data altruism organization. The data sharing agreement describes both the data request datasets and the consent given by the users, whether it is dynamic consent or broad consent. And the way that it works is that once we have a donor that gives a first consent by data sharing consent, it casts allowed broad consent or dynamic consent. Broad consent means that it can specify specific categories of use, and these are matched with those that are requested by the consumer in data sharing request. If those match and are okay, it automatically allows the sharing of the data. If not, it should be notified to the user and has a certain time to answer if they want to give the data to the data user. If not a broad consent, is in a dynamic consent, it means that you're gonna ask every time that a user requests data, so the user can submit a data sharing request, and this process of notification and acceptance will impact on the agreement. So this negotiation for each dataset, it requires, of course, the attention of the user. So this is why a broad consent is more useful for those data donors that don't want to spend much time and trust on the data intermediary to handle correctly the data. Once all this negotiation is happening, whether if it's broad consent or dynamic consent, DCA, the data sharing agreement, is signed by the data consumer or data user, so it can access to the requested data. So these 3 documents, you can find the documentation here. Data sharing consent is based on a JSON LD model, so it can specify the data that is used based on smart data models, the primary use, which is the acquisition from the intermediary, the secondary use that intermediary can use the data for some purposes, and the 3-party sharing, which mandates the data sharing to the user. In the case of the data sharing request, it's a simpler document. You can find the field of use of the data requested, the purpose, the scope, and the lateful basis, geographical scope, the retention period, etc. And of course the list of dataset requested. So this should be handled by the system or the architecture that is using to provide the data sharing request, the datasets regarding their own infrastructure. And the data sharing agreement is similar than the data sharing request because it contains the same data, but it links the data sharing request and links if there's a previous agreement. Of course, the list of datasets as in the data sharing request, and These have the events, which are the process of negotiation, and it has certain specifications you can read, and also the signature that the data user agrees on respect the agreement during that process.